There's only one voice, you bastards! I'm coming down to get you! Robbery bands will advance in Cameroon! Quick, march! La 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 la.
Chief Petty Officer John Routley from Newport, Gwent, is the ship's coxswain. What is he on this ship?
I'm God on board as far as the junior rates are concerned. I'm God and that's it.
Let's go! Come on! Come on, Bud! Come on! I bet you all got lovely hangovers, haven't you? Serve you right! Yep! You lazy bastards! Right.
What the coxswain didn't reveal was that he too had a hangover. But one of the unwritten rules of service life is that the social pleasures of the night before do not interfere in any way with naval routine or the art of minesweeping, defined by First Lieutenant John Harris.
Mine countermeasures is the science of vague assumptions based on debatable figures taken from inconclusive experiments performed with instruments of problematical accuracy by persons of doubtful reliability and questionable sanity.
Chief Petty Officer Routley.
You think so?
How nice to see you.
Thank you, sir.
When are you going to see next?
It takes all kinds to make a world, and I think if I had thought about it earlier in my life, I would have made the Royal Navy my career. And I'm sorry in some ways now that I haven't. Although I've enjoyed working for the Post Office for the 30 years I've worked for them, I would have still, thinking back on it, I wish I had in some ways joined the Royal Navy as a career.
All these men and women from the South Wales Division of the Royal Naval Reserve are based at Barry in South Wales. They range in their civilian occupations from accountants to labourers, and a fair few who are unemployed. This is no longer the wavy navy, the beer and baccy brigade off for a weekend's jaunt down the Bristol Channel. Perhaps 40% of the manpower of Britain's navy will soon be made up of volunteers. The shore establishment is called HMS Cambria. The ship they operate, a new river-class minesweeper, is called Waveney. Richard Wilson is a surveyor in the Welsh office in Cardiff.
It comes home to me just how much I've absorbed over the last 7 years in the reserves, and how much it takes time to get into that and to understand the techniques, to understand the methods which the Navy use, which are so different. And I don't talk an awful lot about my job when I go home. And in the same way, she says to me, have I had a good weekend at sea? Or had a good fortnight? And I say either yes or bloody awful. That seems, as a rule, to be the end of it. And then you either look forward to or dread the next one, as it may be.
In a fortnight's time, Waveney, in company with 3 sister ships, will be going to Rosyth on the east coast of Scotland to start the annual fortnightly assessment by the staff officers of the Royal Navy. It's likely to be tough, and the crew this weekend have just 36 hours in the Bristol Channel to prepare themselves. Every trip starts with the mandatory drills. This one, man overboard, involves swimmer of the watch, Seaman Drains. Well, that's what everyone calls him on this ship.
It's taken 2 years to break drains in, but at long last that boy is coming good, and he really is.
Drains, not like that on your back.
He joined the R&R and came out and he said, P.O., he said, because I was only a petty officer, I've been issued with these trousers, he said, and they're too big for me, he said. Can I take them in? I said, yeah, sure, get your mother to take them in. Oh, cheers, P.O., he said. The next time he turned up for parade, he had drain pipe trousers on. I thought he meant around the waist, but he had drain pipes on. I nearly killed him. And that's how he got his nickname of Drains.
Another mandatory drill is steering gear breakdown. But in this case, a genuine fault is developed in the steering mechanism. Waveney is exercising with another minesweeper, her sister ship Caron, based in Bristol. Waveney's Captain Neil Attenborough.
Ship was proceeding due east, and for some unknown reason steering failed. We've now sent the coxswain back to this after steering position, and we're now attempting to discover the reason why the steering has failed. First of all, we have to maintain the ship by differential propulsion and by steering from the manual position back in the tiller flat. And that's at the stage we've got now. The first attempt is actually coordinating, finding out why the ship has got this fault, and now keeping the ship out of danger by the usage of the throttles. We've signalled to Karen that we have a steering breakdown by NUC balls, yes, and sounded 5 blasts to indicate to any close proximity shipping that we are now not in a position to avoid them and they must avoid us. Fortunately, in the weather like this, there is no problem. We're not in any emergency situation because the nearest ship to us is Karen over there, approximately 3/4 of a mile away.
Most things in the Navy are done by the book, but sometimes the book is somewhat difficult to understand.
Any exercise at sea carries its dangers. An exercise at sea in close quarters to another ship is another additional danger. The manoeuvres in close quarters require practice in order to be good at them. And sometimes during that practice circumstance, things go wrong. Right. It's really from the point of view of this weekend being the workup for Scodex, and it's disappointing that not all the crew obviously for Scodex are here, and some of you who are here are not going. So we have to do our best from the point of view of workup. Who, can I just, so I'm sure, who is it that's not going on Scodex? It's quite a high percentage, vital, key personnel. Number one's gone through the programme, so I don't think I need to labour that at all. Now, there's a document been issued by CMCM which issues the instructions for exercising silent routines by flag. I'd like that, please, tonight, to study.
These modern minesweepers often work in pairs with a sweep wire running between them, to which is attached explosive cutters. If everything goes according to plan, they will detach mines from the seabed. The technique is fraught with all sorts of dangers.
The Royal Navy, by and large, have in the past regarded us as either the gin and tonic Navy or the poor little amateur who's trying to have a weekend's run ashore, and very little respect comes our way. Things are changing. Politically, we're informed that the strength of the Royal Navy is going to be reduced and that of the Royal Naval Reserve increased to 40% of the total available manpower. And I think under those circumstances, the Royal Navy is accepting and understanding that given certain roles, we are professional at them. And what's more, in certain circumstances like minesweeping, we are better than them. How much wide out now, Stuart? 35. 25. Roger. This is the critical point where the wire starts to bounce in the middle whilst they're still actually veering. Because whilst they're veering, the winch cannot be pulled free. When they've got the brake on, that's all right, but not when it's actually veering.
In civilian life, Neil Attenborough also has a highly pressurized existence. He is a consultant facial surgeon. There is a sharp contrast between his bedside manner and the skipper on the bridge.
You starting to feel sleepy? No?
I haven't had a pre-med.
I think you have.
Oh, I have, have I? Why did they tell me I wasn't?
I was initially in the Royal Navy, and when for political decisions the Navy was cut back quite drastically, I was one of the many who were made redundant at a fortnight's notice. I found myself in difficult circumstances in that I had to find a job very quickly, and the only surgical registrar's job, which was about the grade that I was in an appropriate training sector then, was in Cardiff. I was in a post that gave me virtually every aspect towards being a facial surgeon. And I know that you can wiggle both eyebrows up and down independent, which is more than I can. But I think we ought to make sure you can continue to do that. The proper title is maxillofacial surgeon, but most people actually call it Mags Factor or Fags Mac or all sorts of computations of those words.
Range 290 yards.
Roger.
What's he was set ahead?
Range 250 yards.
He was set 8 ahead.
Richard Wilson will be the navigator on the 2-week exercise.
The skills that I have from navigation and the knowledge which I've acquired over 7 years in the reserves don't have an awful lot to do with everyday life. Character building, I suppose, is the greatest aspect of the whole thing. If you can't hack it, you can walk away from it. I think one of the feelings of satisfaction I get is that I don't walk away from it.
Hello, Rich Wilson. Oh, hello, Peter. Yes, I've just got in. Yeah, I intend to go down to Neath later on this morning to sort out one or two problems. There's one or two things on the engineer's report which I want to...
In a way, my job is high pressure, but not in the same concentrated periods that it is on the ship. You only get one chance on the ship to get it right if you're manoeuvring in close quarters. If you make the wrong decision at that time, there is a very strong possibility that the ships will collide.
Okay, now, officer the watch. The procedure for the turn. On the execution of Romeo 2.
By 340 now.
Take wheel off,
Yes.
Right, Romeo 4, close up.
Guide course 270. Now.
Yeah, and we've got down here the famous Neath Canal, haven't we? Yeah. Sitting in the Welsh office at a desk, you can consider things much more carefully.
Wilson has the happy knack of not appearing to be wound up by pressure. He also has a sense of humour about his job on the ship.
The reserve, the Naval Reserve, does require you to make fairly instant decisions based on experience and to get them right all the time. The number of forms that you'd have to fill in if two ships collide is just unbelievable. There's all sorts of people who want to know all about it. It'll ruin your whole day, probably.
John Routley is on the helm of a £3.5 million warship, but in civilian life, he's a postman in Newport.
Well, I've been a postman for 30 years now, ever since I left school. The main reason I joined the post was I like the outdoor life. As far as getting time off to go with the Navy, they're absolutely marvellous, they really are. There's never any questions asked. Just put a note in for work and a special leave form, and it's granted. And a friend of mine that worked in the post office introduced me to it. And I don't know why, but I'd always wanted to go to sea. And never ever got round to joining the Royal Navy. And just decided on the spur of the moment to go down with my friend and join the R&R in Cardiff, as it was at that time, the old HMS Cambria. And I've been with them ever since, which is 24 years now.
Both levers ahead, 4.5.
Levers ahead, 4.5.
It's easy, isn't it?
Romeo 1 at the Romeo 2 is Romeo 2.
Strange to have it like this, isn't it? This after we finish this, we do the TOEX and then have a lunch break. And what would you like to do this afternoon if we go and do some orifices reefing?
After dinner, are you going to index Minesweeper?
Double out.
I'm going to complete some more man overboard drills and steering gear breakdown.
How long do you want to do that for?
1 hour and a half. Is that long enough for you? If you want
To do double out.
2
2 hours. This is a very anterior tumour, and I would imagine that he's going to be right between the ophthalmic and zygomatic branches, which of course is a bit dicky at his age group with them being so small. I'd hate to ruin the ability whereby he can raise one eyebrow independent of the other.
Well, the gentleman had a tumour of the parotid gland, that's one of the salivary glands of the face, which was of a type that slowly grew and could ultimately have involved the facial nerve, which is the nerve that controls facial expression, in other words, the way that your facial muscles move. And in order to remove that growth, it was necessary to dissect out the facial nerve, which is extremely tiny. Some of the branches of it are no thicker than a human hair.
As you know, the incidence of metaplasia with age increases, and so if you actually defer treatment thinking, well, we will use age as a criterion, you will come a cropper, because then your patient actually will remain fit and well with a local problem which has become inoperable. And as you know, in this area we have made that a diktat. Age is no criteria to treatment. Black soap, please. Okay.
The belly, right?
Try. We'll come to that when we see how we get on. And then I'd like ship's companies, if they can, to perhaps get to know one another, so that when they're under exercise conditions, it's better than not knowing who they're talking to by going ashore. Do you agree?
There's an uneasy relationship between the crews of Karen from Bristol and Waveney from Wales. Perhaps it has something to do with that age-old suspicion that the Anglo-Saxons have for the Celts. Neil Attenborough, aware of the tension, is doing his best to bridge that gap. In the meantime, as part of the workup, the Celts tow the Anglo-Saxons who have an imaginary engine failure.
Keep an eye on that towing order.
Sweep deck, bridge, do you hear me?
Bridge sweep deck, they have the hauser on board Karen.
Right.
Both engines clutched in, sir.
Right, both levers ahead too.
Both levers ahead, too. Both levers set to ahead.
Right, tell the sweep deck on that tannoy that I'm coming ahead, and that we can't hear them on the other tannoy.
Sweep deck bridge, we are coming ahead slowly. We cannot hear you on the other voice.
The ship's only, 180 feet long, and we can't hear one another. It's quite ridiculous. Both levers 0.
Both levers 0.
In just 14 days' time, they will be steaming in line ahead with 3 other ships from Liverpool, Belfast and Bristol, under the highly critical eyes of full-time Royal Navy staff officers.
You want to do some stretching of wires, some calibration of...
Check calibration, hinted gear, yes, please.
Can you do that?
Saturday, 0800, another briefing in the ship's wardroom.
In which case, I don't need to alter anything that the First Lieutenant's told you, except also to emphasise 1 or 2 things about this weekend being...
The responsibilities weigh not too heavily on Captain Neil Attenborough.
Organising any team, be it naval or surgical, and making the teams efficient is immensely satisfying.
Remainder, heave in on the wing, slow. Heave in, dead slow.
As far as the Minesweeper is concerned, it's interesting to watch the way that young officers and ratings can be encouraged to develop, just in the same way, to do things that they don't think they were capable of doing.
Ready. Request speed 8 knots.
And to mould the group, the crew, the wardroom, into a team which will actually become efficient and hopefully, should there ever be any form of emergency, mould into a team which will act as one.
The metal kite, this time not properly calibrated, demonstrates its ability to become a lethal danger to the men on the stern. The wire trails near the seabed and will, in theory, cut mines loose and bring them to the surface.
Stand clear. Everyone else, back! Back! Onto there all together.
Prepare to down kite. Stop, on brake.
Stop, brake on.
I don't think that there are many people, either in civilian life throughout the general public, or even perhaps amongst politicians, who realise how cheap and yet utterly devastating the weapon mine is. It is so easy for a submarine or an aircraft or a fishing boat or a yacht even to drop a sequence of mines in estuaries or rivers around the United Kingdom to utterly paralyze the shipping and therefore the harbours and ports to which that shipping would have been either entering or leaving.
Both levers 0. Both levers 0. Both levers set 0. Wheel emitters.
It is known, for instance, that the Warsaw Pact countries have somewhere in the region of 50,000 active mines ready to be sown tomorrow. And one has to ask oneself why.
Stern 2. Both levers are stern 2. Both levers set to astern.
This is the Royal Navy base at Rosyth on the east coast of Scotland. For the next fortnight, all their training is going to be placed in the glare of a very fierce spotlight.
Pipe.
It's 0800 on Wednesday. They've been here in Rosyth Naval Dockyard for 2 days. The ships and their procedures have been examined in fine detail by an army of experts. The relaxed atmosphere of the weekend exercise has gone. The volunteer sailors have been trying to unite to achieve efficiency, and as yet they haven't succeeded.
There was no doubt that we were very green. It had been a long while since we'd done any proper sweeping, largely due to the defects that the ships that we were due to work with over the preceding 18-month period had. In other words, we were not able to exercise our principal role. We were under the eyes of the staff officers, and we knew that we were going to be pressurised and pushed and shouted at and insulted. So all that made for a pattern which was quite nerve-wracking. I also didn't feel too good because I'd caught some form of bug, so I didn't know how I was going to be able to cope myself either.
The unique and sometimes isolated position of the captain doesn't worry Neil Attenborough.
I think any captain that worries too much about what the crew thinks about him is probably not going to have a very happy relationship with his crew.
I told you to bisect the angle. Now we're way off. What is it?
142.
142.
There are 4 minesweepers in this group, each manned by volunteers, and each occupied by a team of Royal Navy personnel, whose job it is, in the space of 7 days, to bring the part-time crews up to a high degree of professionalism. This particular job is onerous for the captain.
If he's not at peace with himself and how he's getting his ship's company to perform, then he's probably not succeeding. I would obviously be very upset if I detected the morale dropping, or if I didn't get a hello or good morning, or even ruder terms. It doesn't really matter how they address you. To get the feel of the ship, it's necessary to look into your crew's eyes.
We've got an island class coming down the port side. Is the bosun's mate there with his call?
One down.
Roger. Right, now the helicopter has arrived.
Waveney's first task on this exercise is to cope with the drop of supplies and personnel onto the sweep deck from a Royal Naval Mark V Sea King helicopter based at HMS Gannet at Prestwick. It's a job requiring precision work, not only from the team on the helicopter, but also from the ship's crew. For most of them, it's the first time they've done this exercise for real. The origins of the ship in the fishing fleets of the North Sea are obvious in the view from the helicopter.
HMS Waveney is a development of a trawler hull to perform a minesweeping role. There have been many problems, and one of the basic ones is, of course, money. But it has been possible to take a standard design and produce it in many numbers, at the moment 12, and there are now orders for 4 more, but unfortunately trawlers at sea carry almost 50 tons of ice, and there's been no substitute for that large weight, so these particular ships are quite lively in a seaway. But nonetheless, they are magnificent vessels for what they have been designed to do.
Even at this early stage, the exercise has not gone very well for Waveney.
As far as today's concerned, I think we let ourselves down. We started with a bad getting ready for sea, and nobody's immune. It looks as if of those actually here now, the vast majority of the blame is at the upper end of the echelons of control with respect to not only clearing for sea but what happened afterwards. Every effort was made by myself and 1 or 2 others to say that when it came to the sweeping side of things, that the books were supposed to be there, the actual gear was supposed to be there, the boat was supposed to be there, and everybody did actually think about having these things, but nobody got them there. And this was picked up by the staff, and for the 4th time we got a below satisfactory. So actually we're not doing very well at all. Now, you all know that we did badly, and I belong to the same category. We made mistakes on the bridge as well, so we've got to do better tomorrow. Now, just to brief you about tomorrow, as you know, not only do we have MCM-10, now if he came on his own, it would be hairy enough. We've got Commodore List 3. If he came on his own, it would be fairly hairy because everybody would be leaping around like a scalded cat. We've got the Staff Chief Yeoman. Now, if anybody's going to really rot us up, it's going to be him. As if that wasn't enough, we've actually got a makey-learny captain coming. Now, MCM-10 is due to actually give him command of the ship, in inverted commas, to do what he will, but I'm still supposed to be responsible for it. So we've got MCM-10, Chief Yeoman, Commodore, and another captain, Uncle Tom Cobley and all, and it wouldn't surprise me if we even got a dog as well. So tomorrow is hairy. Now, if anybody doesn't think from now exactly what they're going to do and not actually put it into action 5 minutes before they're supposed to actually do tomorrow, there's no doubt about it that the heavens will open and we will deserve it.
MCM-10 is naval jargon for Commander Sam McCaskill, commander of the 10th Mine Countermeasures Squadron, the full-time naval officer whose job it is to oversee this mine-sweeping operation. He has a fearsome reputation which he encourages and which he views with relish.
Now, as far as the sweeping is concerned, as you know, we have all day at it. We actually start to form up at 9 o'clock in the morning, so we've got to be absolutely ready for that. But I intend to do some dummy runs first, so we won't be passing wires initially, but we will go through the procedure that we went through this morning, and of course if it's not slick tomorrow, we will deservedly get a real rocket for it.
It's very difficult for the coxswain and the captain to communicate, and it's very important that we do communicate when we're coming in to do the transfer. If there's a load of non-essential personnel on the bridge,
well,
there's radios going, there's a VHF
That's
going.
Right. Well, it's up to you and the chief boatswain's mate to pass the word that goofers will not be welcome on the bridge whilst we are conducting
especially
any
the captain with his sore throat.
That's right.
Why, sir? How are you? I'm fine, thank you. Hope you didn't get too wet.
MCM-10 himself came on board that day, putting over the message very loud and clear that he was there not just to criticise but to help. And that he did. He did it in his own way, which is fairly brusque and sometimes brutal, but nonetheless, as far as I was concerned, he was the sort of man that you could come back to and talk to and question and ask advice of. And when he left with a smile.
Get on with it. Get on with it. Right. Right, off the watch. Let's check starboard.
Carry on.
Right, yeoman. We now need, because we're well adrift, to get on with our minesweeping serial.
So the next signal will be to put Ribble on our starboard side. So I want the signal to put her in a formation which means that she's on our starboard beam. Put Ribble on our starboard beam. Alright?
Hang on a minute. What you actually need to do is have her in Form 1.
You've done that, sir?
And you start from there.
Done that.
That's all you need to do.
At the moment, signal faster than signal faster.
We'll keep her in Form 1, then we can start the sweeping. If you get the books out, I'll show you. You don't need to do anything else to her.
For the first time, Neil Attenborough is showing signs of nervous strain.
Yes, of course one's nervous because you're anxious to do well, and when you're anxious to do well and get everything right, especially when you know within yourself that you are trying to bring forward every single neuron that's at the back of your head in order to remember all that you've learned over the last 20 years and bring it to a point whereby it will be functional and applicable to a particular circumstance. Under those pressures, you very often forget things, and that's when you start to become a little nervous of yourself. Not nervous of anybody that's pressurizing you, nervous to do well.
Whenever you're ready. Bullseye!
We had an episode only weeks ago when we were only 30 yards from one of our other Minesweepers, and I realized that their bow was coming very sharply towards us. Unfortunately, their officer the watch managed to reach the sound siren and pressed it. He'd managed to give me those few microseconds time in order to act in my own ship. Otherwise, there certainly would have been a collision.
That's for the wash-up afterwards.
The sweep wire between the two ships is dotted with explosive cutters, gadgets which slide down the wire and blow the mine free from its tether on the seabed. The system is not without its obvious dangers.
Our principal deterrent relies upon submarines, and they come and go via a few waterways. And the function of these ships is, in fact, to sweep at great depths mines which are intended to inhibit that deterrent. That's the primary role.
Do you wish me to hand over to the captain?
Yes, please.
We are now at the state whereby we are in the process of raising the kite. We have no report that it is disconnected. We have disconnected the Waveney beam, and we are now at 350 yards from the guide.
Yep.
The guide is steering a course of 265. Right. There is no. The Romeo 1 is not at the, and therefore they presumably are not at the same stage.
You haven't told him which way you're turning.
Oh dear. We have a Corporate Lima port desig 8 in the air, and that is executed.
Roger. Okay, cut the way.
Do you have it? Roger. I hope you haven't got indigestion now.
Say again.
I hope you haven't got indigestion after that.
Well, did you enjoy that?
Yes, sir. It's good to get it concentrated. Your learning curve goes up dramatically.
When was your last time for a fortnight at sea?
I did the second Mediterranean deployment this year in May.
Yeah, a bit different to Palmer.
Yes, well, I mean, you can't have the sunshine all the time, but it was nice in Palmer. I liked that. That was a nice deployment all round, I thought.
It was. Except we got bloody awful weather the last fortnight.
Yeah.
Just after you'd gone.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah.
We lost we had 75 knots. We lost 3 days of the exercise.
I was out in it.
Sailing?
Yeah. We really had a rough time, actually.
Where were you?
Well, we came out of Jib just as it started.
I didn't know you were in Jib then.
Well, I had problems, like I was being threatened with being arrested by a Polish authority because they towed me in after a problem off North Africa. And they wanted their money immediately.
You didn't have any?
Didn't have it, no.
The ships form a diagonal formation, the sweeping gear trailing astern.
if these minesweepers were put into shallow water to try and sweep shallow moored mines, they wouldn't last 5 minutes, and we would be cannon fodder, just the same as the reservists and the RMVRs and the RNXSs were made cannon fodder in 1939 and 1940. And I don't think there are many of us in the reserves who've got any illusions about it. But if we are used for our proper role, i.e. if the inshore minesweeping squadrons were enabled to sail through the shallow water to the deep water, I feel we could then be very efficient.
3 seconds, wait.
Got it out.
All working much too slow. We've actually dragged out here 4 ships that are supposed to be doing lap turns and sweeping in a exercise minefield, yeah? Much too slow. We did have an emergency there, the men, yeah? Very swift, but very, very safe, okay? Any questions on what we did there?
No.
Did everybody see what went wrong?
Yes.
It wasn't calibrated correctly, yeah? Bad form, that. It should have been calibrated. Okay, it wasn't. What we're hoping to do now is that this is going to run reasonably well so we can actually go into the lap and keep the kite down, yeah? Okay, team?
Yeah, okay.
More speed, but do it safely.
Right.
Let's go.
It's Thursday, midday. MCM-10 has departed. The tension on board breaks.
Sailor, first aid party to the bridge. With a stretcher, first aid party to the bridge.
Go on, you're supposed to be in agony, Coxswain.
I am.
Scream then! Scream!
Hurry up, the sun's in my eyes.
We're not allowed to die yet, Coxswain. You haven't signed the forms.
Horse is 300.
He's looking at a horrid colour.
We have some extra bodies on this, please,
sir. He's moaning at the man on that other side. Now, we practice burial at sea. This is the cookies
Bye-bye,
way.
Coxswain.
Okay, Coxswain, I reckon you've recovered. Back to work.
But the fun is only for a moment. A genuine exercise is about to follow. They have to demonstrate their ability to fight one of the worst disasters any ship can suffer at sea, a fire.
Well, your best bet is to look up forward, because that's where all the other stuff is.
That's what's happening. Flames.
What's that? Quick, go on.
Maneuver alarm off steering compartment. Standing clear starboard. Close up and investigate.
Right! Now you've done the hatch, tend the hoses. Keep it pointing down the hatch behind you. When you get down there, you will fight the fire.
Despite the fact that the ship's only 3 years old, the Minesweeper's armament is a 1940s Bofors gun, the 4060. The remote-controlled weapon that should have been on the bow was a victim of a round of government cheese paring. However old their gun is, they still have to know how to fire it.
First part is to prove the weapon itself, the 4060, and we will be having shore personnel aboard to carry out gun functioning trials. If that goes successfully, then we will then join the rest of the squadron and carry out a surface shoot using the 4060 and then GPMGs. The surface shoot will be against a free-floating target provided by one of the other ships.
4060. Surface. Target. Bearing. Red 10. Range 1,000 yards. Command approved. 4060. Engage. Check.
Once that has been completed, there will be an AA shoot against parachute flares, which we will fire off ourselves.
4060, target, aircraft, bearing, wave 45, angle of sight, 60, range 1000.
Engage!
Check.
Right, GPMG crew, gun officer. Close up, clear away, port GPMG crew. Your arc of fire will be
Grid 150, right limited bearing, grid 90.
Left limited bearing, 50, right limited bearing, 090, sir.
Check safety bearing. Clear visual. Clear visual, clear blind.
That's incorrect.
Line of crew, GPMG. First, engage. On safety. Train onto a safe bearing.
carry on with firing. Yes, stand to.
After an exhausting fortnight, Neil Attenborough, like the other members of the crew, has to start thinking about his job. In his case, with an ever-increasing number of operations on his waiting list. Both of these jobs require extraordinary amounts of concentration.
She's very worried about her inability to play games and run and breathe properly, isn't she? She has basically got a relatively normal face, but the whole of the right side is atrophied, and in other words, has not grown at the same rate as the opposite side. So she has a pupil level which is down on one side, a maxilla, the top jaw, which is smaller than the other side, so that accentuates the drop in pupil line. And because the lower jaw has not grown in its two halves at the same rate, it has swung to one side. So if you have a look at this X-ray here, you see that the relationships of her skull to her face are wrong. Wait, can you kick the foot control across, please? Yeah. Right, bit more. Right, top. My finger burn next there, please. Extending the retraction now to bring the burr cut going vertical all the way along the jaw when I can get my foot control working. Okay, let's take that out, put the prop round the other side. Alex, if you'd like to put a couple of holes around the other side and put your wire in, please. We're actually threading a wire through the back of the jaw, across where we've actually fractured it. Okay, through. Hold the wire, thank you. In case you get alarmed in a little while, I shall actually be putting the jaw into IMF. We haven't forgotten your pack. At least we haven't forgotten it at the moment. You better remind us later. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Range 245 yards. 245.
Starboard 5 steer 270.
5 steer 270.
For John Routley, the devotion to the Royal Naval Reserve requires no less effort and time than that of his skipper.
We all come from different walks of life. I mean, the captain is an oral surgeon. The first lieutenant works for local government. The WEO works in a steel works. The MEO works in a nuclear power station. And we come from all different walks of life. And it's, when you sit down at night and we start talking, and invariably goes back to your job, the experiences and all we've had, and the experiences in the Royal Naval Reserve that we've all had, and sometimes in the Royal Navy, because the MEO is ex-Royal Navy, and a few more, it makes wonderful conversation. It's tremendous. Most people in the Royal Navy don't know that the Royal Naval Reserve exists. I think we get a lot of respect from MCM 10 and his staff. Although they give us rollickings, they've still got that respect for us, that we are mad enough to give up a fortnight of our time and quite a few weekends and a couple of nights a week to do what we're doing. They think that we're mad.
First Lieutenant John Harris is a finance officer with the Taff Ely Borough Council.
It there's a request is being made to the bridge to open the hatch or to do something, everyone just waits until they make up their mind and say yay or nay. Nobody starts going then. You've got to leap about a bit more than you are.
Do people change character when they come aboard?
Yes, it's the old Jekyll and Hyde syndrome, I think. A hobby or pastime, I think, has got to be a complete change from what I do in everyday life. And one of the advantages of, I find, and one of the pleasures of being in the R&R is that it's totally different, absolutely different from anything I do in normal, everyday civilian life. Hence the suntan. Yes, it's fading, but it's there. It's fading. That it is a relaxation in a way, although you can come back at the end of a weekend or a fortnight very tired.
The exercise is coming to an end, and the fleet is sailing for Rotterdam for the traditional jolly ashore, the carrot that is normally available at the end of each annual exercise. Waveney's crew have discovered that the HTV cameraman Mike Matthews is about to celebrate a birthday. They decide to give him a traditional naval birthday lunch on the sweep deck, organised by First Lieutenant John Harris and Chief Petty Officer John Routley.
I hope he took it in good part, and I'm sure he did anyway. We plan these things in advance, and because Mike's been doing his fair share of winding people up this week, we thought that we'd get our own back on Mike and HTV in general, if you like.
You fucking liked it. Excuse me.
Totally no. The wine was nice. Don't miss the wine.
Sweet! Sweet! Oh, sorry about that. Fucking shit, keep that bastard still, man!
Is that all right, sir? I think he likes it. Yeah. Oh, you cocked it up again. Oh.
I fucking resigned.
The exercise has been a success, the weather unusually good, and although they don't know it yet, Waveney has won the year's coveted trophy as the best organised minesweeper in the United Kingdom. But why do they give up so much time and effort to this cause? Skipper Neil Attenborough.
The principal reason is that the defence of the country is far too important to be left to politicians and to the professionals, because the professionals are the puppets of the politicians. You've only got to look at the last 10 years when the politicians completely axed 50% of the Royal Naval Reserve and its medical branches, and now are screaming out to try and get people back again. An impossible task, because it takes a generation to retrain people. We had a crisis 3 years ago in the Falkland War when there was not one single non-consultant grade medical officer left in the country, largely because the politicians had decided at the time that they didn't want them. Now they are screaming out to get them back again. And unless members of the public understand and recognize that defense is an insurance policy, then only a fool throws away his insurance policy and stops paying his premium purely because he feels safe at the time. Human nature, history, dictate that those nations who will ultimately drop their guard by not being involved themselves in their defense policy will, at some stage, succumb to the greed of the human. It's human nature. So, to be involved in the Royal Naval Reserve is my contribution actually to the defence side of things.
There is another reason why he's aboard this ship.
And finally, I love being at sea. I don't think I really would want to belong to the Royal Naval Reserve unless I could go to sea, because sitting behind a desk would bore me stiff.